So welcome everyone, especially everyone at home, presumably in a nice warm location that's joining us this evening, and all of those in council chambers. So welcome to our February 22nd meeting. Without further ado, first item of business, Madam Clerk.
Roll call, Your Worship. I've taken the roll and all members of council are present with the exception of Councillor Berry.
Thank you. And next item, please.
A motion to adopt this evening's agenda, Your Worship.
Motion for the agenda, Councillor Lupke, seconded by Councillor Parker. Any changes or additions? Not seeing any. I'm going to call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Confirmation of the minutes of the special meeting of council held January 29th.
Moved by Councillor Cullen, seconded by Councillor Chaboyer. Any errors or omissions? That was certainly a long meeting. So. Again, not seeing any changes. Going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. And next item, please.
Confirmation of the minutes of the regular meeting of council held February 7th.
And moved by Councillor Cameron, seconded by Councillor Frangie. And any errors or omissions? Not seeing any. Calling the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Under the order of delegations, Your Worship, we have Mr. John Burgess on behalf of Waverley Developments regarding the subdivision application for 1910 Hamilton Avenue.
Very good. We'll just go and just for the public's interest, again, to the capacity limits here in the council chamber, speakers and presenters wait out in the hallway and then are brought in as it's their turn. So it takes a minute. Welcome, Mr. Burgess.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. Thank you very much for allowing me this time to present my issue with you. Would you like me to start?
Yep, go right ahead. Yep.
So I'm here on behalf of Waverley Developments. They own property on the North Hill, immediately south of the number 1 highway and west of 18th Street. So it's kind of an undeveloped farmland at the present time. This property has been set aside by MI, Manitoba Infrastructure, for the past 20 years for the possible redirection of number 1 highway into Brandon, at least on the west side. We had interest in the property immediately west of the Husky by a highway tractor trailer company. We attempted to subdivide the property, and MI again nixed that and does not allow any type of access onto that property, thereby making it, in fact, the whole parcel virtually undeveloped. Now, Waverley has owned the property for 10 years and has paid taxes on it every year. But unfortunately, with regards to the provincial government's set-aside requirement, it cannot be developed. That's bad for the developer. There's no doubt about that. But it's also, I would submit, bad for the city of Brandon. 18th Street is one of Brandon's main entranceways. It's been set aside by the city development as ideal property for highway commercial, highway hospitality use. And the use we were proposing for it was consistent with the city's plan. Unfortunately, if the province does not change the set-aside requirement, that property will remain in an undeveloped stage, and I would submit that's not good for the city of Brandon either. Now, I have had initial discussions with the new Minister of Infrastructure, and he is going to be looking at it, but I would ask for the city's backing and support as well if you feel that this property should be developed in the near future. Now, I came here tonight partly at the suggestion of planning, the city planning, and I appreciate all the assistance that they've attempted to give. They certainly aren't responsible for these delays or problems, but it's really beyond the city planning ability to resolve this situation. It's entirely the province's. So I am here really just bringing this to your attention. I don't think I'm the only landowner that's affected by the city, by the set-aside either. So it's not just a one-off. And I guess I would like to invite any questions or concerns that the council might have with regards to this situation.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Burgess. Very succinct and well presented presentation. So we will open up the floor to questions that any councillor may have. I'll maybe start it off. As you know, it does appear later on our agenda, so I've kind of opened the package up, and just so I sort of understand the subdivision application, there's that sort of strip of property that kind of goes east-west, bordering Middleton Avenue, and then there's, on the map I'm looking at, is a kind of a hatched, looks like a quarter of the property being proposed for subdivision, and the rest they're calling residual parcel. So is it just this hatch portion? I'm sorry if you're not, I can't show you what I'm looking at, but...
I think I know what your worship is looking at. Thank you very much, Councillor Fawcett. The property, the thatched parcel, is immediately west of the Husky. The parcel to the west of the thatched parcel, that actually is set aside, that MI wanted for, let's call it a modified cloverleaf. So I knew that that parcel was not developable. So we did a subdivision taking away that thatched portion from the undevelopable property, and we're trying to sell that portion only, respecting that the province definitely maybe wanted to hold up development for the unthatched property, if I could refer that to it.
Okay, so really what's before council is the subdivision application that really divides that long piece of property in not exactly half into two parcels, and then would leave you the opportunity to do potentially something with the easterly piece.
Yes.
And leaving still set aside what highways may want in the future?
That we had been told would want in the future.
Okay.
Yes. But if I could, Your Worship, I would like to stress that the rest of the quarter section is tied up with this set aside as well, because of course the proposed highway route is right through the middle of the quarter. And yes, they don't want all of the quarter, but it's rather hard to plan a development when you may or may not have a very large highway going through the quarter section.
Yeah. Okay, I'll open up the floor. Councillor Fawcett, go ahead, and then Councillor Cullen.
Thank you yourself to Mr. Burgess. Now, this is probably not a question for yourself. It probably is more for MI. But for example, the Husky, where it sits right now, how does it fit into their plans?
I cannot speak to that.
Yeah, I'm just, because I am curious, it would be a discussion we do need to sort of have with them, because it is still 20 years or so that they're telling you, like that it could be, or it's been 20 years.
No, it's been
25.
indefinite.
Yeah.
That's the problem. In my understanding, though, the Husky is fine where it is. And so is the land immediately to the west, that thatched part. That was okay. I was quite surprised when MI said, no, we're not even going to give you an access onto that.
Okay, so just to follow up with, like today you're really just looking at that thatch piece.
Yes.
And we've actually used the term thatched more than I thought we'd ever use it, council. But we need to look at this whole piece because it is sort of in a limbo.
Yes.
So if we can try to deal with the issue sort of right at hand, but then we have to follow up because we sort of have that route that you can, like when I'm looking at the map and you know it too, that route that looks like it goes right through the middle.
It does.
Like, so that's quite significant. I know we have the same issue on the south end with some potential highway work as well there. We really need to get on the same page with I and start being able to plan these future developments. So we'll stick to the item on the agenda today, but we do need to make sure we're working with MI and yourself as a developer and such to make sure that we can move forward with some of these projects. We're really tied into a limbo there, so.
And there has been other implications. I can probably discuss it a little more when we get to the matter at hand, as opposed to through this delegation, but there's periodic other development and commercial issues along that whole Trans-Canada portion that hinders sometimes and frustrates property owners and business owners up there because of the sort of uncertainty that's left. So I have Councillor Cullen, then Councillor Lupke.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to our presenter, Mr. Burgess. So what you're telling us is that the actual 20-year-old plan that we've seen with clover leaves, and I've seen both clover leaves that are supposed to be positioned at 1st Street and also 18th Street, so that the land that you're looking for right now has nothing to do with taking away from the MI's ability to be able to install that clover leaf. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Cullen, Councillor Cullen, that is my understanding. That's why we only applied for that thatched parcel.
Okay. So, again, I'll save my other comments to when we discuss it.
Thank you. And Councillor Lupke.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Burgess. In kind of reading the report, it sounded like one of the concerns was about access to the property. That kind of what's your vision on that access point for accessing new property?
Yes, Your Worship. As I mentioned, the MI's response to our subdivision application was to deny any access to that property.
Right.
It was suggested, I believe, by city planning, that maybe we should get a deal with Husky so we could access through their property. Ultimately, of course, that would be a cost. Ultimately, if I own, say, a motel on the subject property, I'm not so sure I would want my patrons driving through Husky's parking lot to access the hotel. It's not workable.
Right.
But that was a suggestion.
So was there, sorry, through your worship, was there a solution to come off Highland Avenue then?
No, not that I've been offered.
Service Road?
No. And I have brought this up with the new minister, and he is looking into it as well. And perhaps an option will be forthcoming on this specific issue. On the broad issue on this quarter section and other property tied up with this set aside, I think the city should look at that as well. Please.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't know if I saw any other hands. Anybody else have questions? Not seeing any. I think that's covered off. And as you know, this does come up later on our agenda, so thanks for coming ahead and giving us more background and answering questions. So,
Thank you. Good evening.
good. Thank you very much, Mr. Burgess. And a motion to receive would be in order, please. Councillor Fawcett, would you like to take that one, or?
I can. Thank you, Your Worship, here that the presentation by John Burgess with respect to the subdivision application for 1910 Hamilton Avenue be received.
Seconded by Councillor Cullen. Any discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Next item, please.
Under the order of public hearings, Your Worship, we have an amendment to the concept plan for 415 25th Street.
Very good. So we are going to open a public hearing. Now we're getting a little more practiced at this. We just had a big one last week. I suspect we normally lead off with a presentation from administration to give us an overview. Is that the... Okay. So Mr. Nicol is apparently on Teams and available to give us an overview. So go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Council, can everyone see my screen?
Yes?
Okay, perfect. Just some quick background for Council and the public. The site known as the Fleming site is to the north of Victoria, so north of the commercial development there that was developed approximately 10 years ago. Originally, when that site was brought forward, it was rezoned to residential moderate density. At the time, the city went through a request for proposal process. We were the owners of the land, and the successful proponent developed the commercial portion on the south and had a partnership with Brandon University to develop the northern portion of the site for student housing. The commercial proponent proceeded, and that portion of the site has been developed, and the northern portion for the university housing did not move forward. So the application today is not to discuss whether this property should be rezoned for residential moderate density. The property is zoned for residential moderate density. The application is to amend the development agreement because there's been a change in the concept. And there's a change in the concept because the BU portion is not proceeding as originally proposed, and there's been a revised proposal from the developer, the commercial proponent, for affordable housing on that portion. The proponent had already gone through the City of Brandon's affordable housing program in the partnership with the funding, so we're not discussing that today, but that is the background on why we're here, where we're at. This is just a photo of the site. I think it's well known for residents. It's largely been open green space over the years, and was part of the school site when Fleming operated as a public school. This is the plan of the original concept. It shows that it included a larger multi-story building at the central area of the site and lower density row house or semi-detached units around the edges on 25th and Louise Avenue. And this is the revised concept being proposed by the proponent. In your report, it outlines a few of the key differences in the concepts. So I'll just highlight a few for you here today. For the total units, the original proposal had 42 total units, which included 18 townhouse units and a 24-unit building. And the new concept plan is 48 total units, so that's 6 additional units. It should be noted that the 48 units is significantly less than the maximum density in the zoning bylaw for the site at 70 units. The maximum building height is 4 stories in the RMD zone, and that is the building height being proposed, which is taller than the original proposal, which had a multi-unit building of 3 stories. It should be noted that the new proposal does propose additional setbacks. So the developer is proposing a 10-meter front yard and over 6-meter side yard, which exceeds the zoning requirements of 6 meters in the front and 3 meters in the side. And that was the understanding through the community process of providing additional spacing to decrease the presence of the building along the street and provide additional green space. On the parking side of things, which was a big component that came out through the process, there's 105 total parking spaces in that parking lot. So 20 of those parking stalls, the one on the southern portion of the site, will be for the commercial component, and 72 parking spaces will be for the residential. So the zoning bylaw requirement for residential parking is 1.5 per unit, and what's being proposed is 1.75 per unit. And this is a rendering that was done up by the developer to show kind of the potential of the project, and this was presented as part of the public engagement portion that occurred before this public hearing today. There was a event hosted by the developer with the residents, and that was on October 13th to receive comments, and I'll let them speak to that event further. But from staff's perspective, there has been items addressed as I discussed through the analysis. And coming up to this application, we did not receive any additional comments. So once again, the request is to amend the development agreement. The zoning complies with the area that was done when the proposal originally came for 10 years ago. And conditions getting recommended by administration include that the new development agreement, of course, has the plan attached, which hold the developer accountable to constructing what they propose through the process. There's a requirement for consolidation. That's just a legal piece of it. And then there's the revised requirement for the sidewalk. There was always going to be a sidewalk on 25th Street. There's just a change in the location of the sidewalk where now it will be pinned to the curb to preserve existing trees closer to the property line. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nickel. So we will open up the floor to any questions that council may have. I'll just remind you, we will be coming back to this item later on the agenda. This portion is the public hearing, so we will want to reserve as much time for those that want to be heard. But certainly welcome any questions of Mr. Nickel that you'd like to help clarify this portion. Not seeing any questions just for now. So again, of course, we'll get to speak to you again when it comes up a little bit later in the agenda. So thank you very much, Ryan. And we will be getting to hear from the applicant, I believe, and any other people that wish to be heard here right directly. So I think we'll have them come in. Welcome.
Push any buttons on here? Okay. Thank you and good evening, Council. My name is Damon McGilvery. This is my first time here, so please excuse me. I'm here to discuss and answer your questions in regarding the affordable housing project being developed at the old Fleming Street. As you saw from City's presentation there, and you guys are well familiar with this development. It's been in the works for a number of years, and we are excited to finally make this project a reality. I just wanted to speak to why we see this affordable housing project as a great developmental opportunity and a great addition to the city. This location is a very big deal. It's going to build but the thing that I think that makes this project so good is the amenities that are located so close to it. In almost the same parking lot, we have doctor's office, dentist's office, we got pharmacies, accounting, food, financial institutes. Within walking distances, we have parks, universities, other shopping centers. So with that, and public transportation, of course, which stops right in front of Sunrise Credit Union. So I see this as a very good thing to serve families that perhaps don't have vehicles, or those that rely on public transportation. People with disabilities and senior citizens. As for a track record with the developer, he owns the other two buildings that have been developed to the southwest and southeast parcels of land, Sunrise Credit Union building. So I think that there's been a strong track record that's been demonstrated, the ability to get a large project done and completed and be successful in the area. Working with Kirk and their engineers on the design of the exterior of this building, he is not one to spare expenses and cut corners. Once completed, we believe that this building will be a perfect addition to the neighborhood. And as in the last presentation you saw, we held a public consultation on October 13th, inviting members of the public in close proximity to this development. Some of the biggest concerns from that were parking, tenants, and construction. And as you and certainly Councillor Cameron would know, parking on 25th Street is right now a disaster. It's being clogged up by the use of parking for the commercial tenants. I think in the presentation was shown that we're going to be providing 30 parking lots reserved on the south edge of the property, and those are going to be reserved specifically for the building. And I'm hoping that that will alleviate a lot of the parking concerns as well. And I know that parking for the residential portion, I believe it's 1.5 times requirement per unit. We've gone above that and gone to 1.75, so I think that this should provide a lot of parking and make sure the streets are cleared. Another big issue was this, what defines affordable housing? And I think to most people, they thought that this was going to be low-income housing. Once explained the difference between the two, where affordable housing is for families making an income jointly, children of 65,000. I think a lot of those concerns were alleviated. Once completed, we will have a property management company looking after the property with a robust screening process put in place. And as far as the construction concern, with any job site, there will be noise and there will be a mess. But we can mitigate some of that by having a construction plan put in place to minimize those. It's also a requirement from the city. With that being said, I just want to, on behalf of Kirk Brugger, I'd like to thank the city and the province of Manitoba and their partnership on this project, and we look forward to breaking ground with you and making this project a success.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. McGilvery. We will open up the floor for questions that any member of council may have. So go ahead. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. McGilvery. Appreciate you coming out here this evening, Damon. I do have one question with regards to parking. As we talked about at the public hearing, it's something that's very top of mind for the residents around there. You noted 1.75 parking spots per unit, and also noted the overflow parking, 30 stalls for the commercial unit, which I think will be very helpful there. In the development, though, is there any parking allotted for visitor parking? I think that's one of the things that maybe came as a concern for residents as well, is that if people are having visitors to the unit, is there visitor parking within that space, or is that something that's going to spill over onto either 24th Street or onto Lorne Avenue? Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, so we're gonna have a section of the parking lot that's gonna be designated for visitor parking. I don't want to give you a number on how many spots are because I just don't know.
Thank you.
And Councillor Bossett.
Yes, thank you, through your worship, to Mr. McGilvery. Thank you for coming to council and talking about this. One of the things about building in a developed area is staging and everything for the construction should be able to be taking place on site. Like there is enough property there to, because it is, construction's construction. It'll be a nuisance for probably the year or so that it would take to build something like that. But as long as the staging could be as much as possible kind of not on the public areas and not on the street, I know that that's possible. I think that's just a request probably of residents, and that would be the plan, I'm assuming. Yeah. Construction is the nuisance at best.
Add to that, I think it's a large parcel of land that.
Yeah, it looked like it was, so just was a reminder to do that. Case.
And Councillor Cameron, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll throw another one out there if I could in it. Through Your Worship to Mr. McGilvery, another parking question, but this comes into account with the avenue there. I know one of the things that was raised at the public hearing was the question of, with the building being oriented towards the avenue, and having that set back from the street, there was a lot of concern that people would forego purchasing a stall or owning a parking spot and look to just find street level parking there. So I'm just wondering, as part of your agreement or your end goal of bringing tenants in there, is there a requirement of a tenant coming in there that they do have a parking stall, or how do you vet or mitigate the risk there, as far as somebody saying, yeah, I'm not interested in a parking spot, but then turn around and park either on 24th Street or the Avenue. Obviously, both are open to park where they so choose, but how are you going to mitigate that?
To Councillor, I believe one way we're going to mitigate that is through the design of the actual building, and to have the entrances and the exits not off the back of the building. So if they're off the back of the building, obviously you're going to try to, there's that easy jump out of the vehicle and walk across that. But if we have it off of the sides and through the front of the building, out in the back, that's
Perfect, thank you. I appreciate that, through your worship. I know that's one thing that'll, obviously residents have had a lot of concerns with the project, and your group has done a lot to mitigate some of the concern there, but that'll be one thing that residents will be happy to hear as well. Obviously, is that an orientation is facing south and to the east and west directions to have people accessing the building that way. So.
right. And I guess just to speak in another part, I know the building was the building placement was a bit of a concern too. Looking at that with the engineer and parking on the north side of it, that would have created so much more traffic noise for residents in that area. On that north side, parking on the south side, that is we're shielding that off as much as possible.
Perfect, thank you.
And Councillor Chapoy.
Thank you, Your Worship, through the presenter. I'm just going to piggyback on Councillor Fawcett's comment about the construction site. My experience over the years when we've seen blocks being built like this is the access that the big trucks need to get into the site, and I hope that can you confirm for me that you've come up with a good plan to ensure that all the large trucks and everything that's going to be required for your project are going to be the least intrusive to the people that live in the neighborhood. For safety purposes, it's just it can be overwhelming for big trucks and families trying to live around this neighborhood and deal with your construction zone.
You have my word that we are going to put together the best plan possible. I mean, we live in the community.
Shortest route possible into the site and the shortest route out without.
Yes,
going
and
through.
I believe we have that parking, the main entrance coming off pretty well right off of Victoria Avenue. So I'm hoping that that's where most truck traffic is going to come in off of Victoria Avenue and into.
And excuse me, just on that too, have you put a lot of thought into where you're placing your garbage and recycling dumpsters and everything too, because that requires larger vehicles coming into the site too that can impact the neighborhood?
Okay, I didn't see any other hands at the moment. Okay, I think we got it covered. Thank you very much, Damon, and we'll hear where this goes. Welcome.
Hello. Mask off, okay?
You bet.
All right, so my name's Josh Sealand. I live right across from the proposed development here in Brandon. I just wanted to
Now,
give
if
you...
we had your address, if you don't mind.
Sure,
just for the
yeah,
record.
426 on 25th.
25th, thank you. Go ahead, Josh.
Okay. I just wanted to give some feedback against this development. Part of it is related to population density. That is clearly and consistently linked to things like lower property values, especially with developments such as this one, stress, fatigue, crime, suicide, traffic noise, depression, anxiety, and pollution. Loss of green space in an area that's already flood prone is also negative. Green space helps to buffer noise and heat and improves air quality, actually increases property value, reduces stress, anxiety, and crime. This block that we're looking at on 25th is already filled on both sides due to the commercial development on the south side of this lot, all weekdays. Having at least evenings and weekends, a little bit more reasonable traffic-wise, is something that's also going to now disappear with dozens of new residents coming into the area. And even with a parking lot, this increased noise and pollution and risk of traffic is also a reality. That intersection at 25th and Louise is already in desperate need of a four-way stop. It's now a pretty popular shortcut for people to drive through to get into that commercial lot. And it's only a matter of time, I think, before one of the local kids who goes up to that bus stop, including mine, is going to get hit. And finally, with all of these negative factors coming to the area, people are still wondering who exactly the tenants will be, how will be managed and by who. And it's pretty sad to see a lot of the homeowning families around, including two on my block and one over on Louise, are now selling due to this development.
Okay, thank you very much. You don't mind answering some questions if council have any of you? Okay, very good. We're not that hard to get along with, so we'll try and make them fairly presentable. So we'll open up the floor to questions of Mr. Seeland. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll put this one out for Mr. Seeland as well. Through Your Worship to Mr. Seeland, obviously, living directly across the street from this proposed development, as it stands now, the traffic volume and obviously the street level parking is a concern. Do you foresee, with the developer looking at moving some of that parking internally to the property and then ultimately moving some of the street level parking off, obviously, onto that site? Is there a trade-off there, or do you still feel there isn't a balance, I guess you could say, for the trade-off of moving commercial parking onto their property?
I mean, it's hard to say. I don't know what the size of the parking lot will be. I know that commercial parking lot is full all the time, as are both sides of the street, which reduces it down to one lane. I mean, if you try to drive down there during the day on a weekday, you can't. So the thought of having construction equipment there for a year, I don't see what's going to be able to happen unless they close that block to traffic. Who parks there? People who use the clinic, people who go to the dentist there. The people who work there can get a close spot, because I know all these people, I see them every day, but I don't know how many spots they're planning on building. I don't know how many people they anticipate are going to have vehicles that need to be parked in the parking lot. I know the existing parking lot gets used for car rallies at night, right? So I don't know if that's going to be any more fun than the one that's there. So it's hard to say. I don't have the specifications on what their proposed size of a parking lot is.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, just to help out, the presentation, I guess, our staff made, and I don't know if you can hear very well out in the hall. You certainly can't see the maps. I believe they did say that 30 parking stalls were being created just for the commercial, and then 72, is it, for the tenants? 85 for the tenants, plus 30 for the commercial. Yeah. So it was, they're a little above the standard for the residential, and then the 30. I happen to have the Google Maps up here of your block, and sure enough, the street's lined with cars, just as you indicated. But it looks like it is about 9 or 10 on the east side of 25th Street across the street from you there, and presumably could be a similar amount on the west side in front of your house, whatnot. So it sounds like more than that will go into what they're proposing. So to Councillor Cameron's question there in terms of helping to, looks like there could be 16 to 20 cars, I guess, that could be parking on your block if it was all filled up, and they would take that much in half again more in the lot they're proposing. Whether that just sucks those up and others come across the street from you is yet to be seen, I guess, but just wanted to provide what we've been told on that. And sorry, I missed the hands up. Councillor Fawcett, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. Part of it has been answered. I was going to ask, is it two-way parking on your street right now, which it sounds like it is. One of the things I guess we could consider doing, having had some of these larger developments happen in developed areas up on the North Hill, we've had to look at going to one-way parking on some, on only one side. So we could have our traffic people looking at that. If there's proposed parking that can satisfy the commercial, I think that maybe the street could do one-side parking that if people have to, in crazy times, if they have to park a block or two further, then maybe they have to, but it would keep a little congestion off of the street, maybe even less than now. So that is something that maybe we could look at, because we've seen that be the case before. Older road that is just sort of set for traffic. Two-sided parking does get a little hectic. So that's something we could consider. I wasn't sure if it was two or one.
Yeah, Councilor Cameron?
Thank you, through your worship, and just sort of a follow-up to that. I know anecdotally as well, following the public consultation on it, this is something that we've asked administration as well to look at that, not specifically for 25th, but on Louise Avenue. So yeah, definitely I think adding that to administration looking at that, because I can definitely speak to Mr. Seeland's mention there, in that street, when both sides are parked, it's a one-lane traffic, and oftentimes thankful to the driveways, which is its own bag of challenges, but thankful to the driveways you're able to pull over to let a vehicle by to pull back out. So definitely I think that's a great point in adding that to administration, looking at that as a possibility.
Thank you. And Councillor Chaboyer.
Thank you, Worship. Through the presenter, I guess I could ask this the last presenter, but I'll ask you. I'm assuming that you went to the presentation. You mentioned your concern about air and noise pollution, those kinds of concerns. Did the developer say they were going to put in fairly mature trees so that there is a good buffer between the homes and this development? Because I think that would help with the air pollution and also the sound experience, and plus aesthetically it'll look nicer in the neighborhood. Were you promised by them that they would be looking at not a little 2-foot tree, but something that's fairly
The renderings are always magnificent, right?
Yeah.
The thought of a sidewalk going there has me worried about the existing lindens that are 40 feet high that are already on the east side of there, if they'll still be there. I mean, that's a good start, but yeah, I think the renderings showed and they spoke to it quite a few times, of a green buffer, which if it happens, is for sure appreciated, not only for the people on the outside, but I'm sure the people on the inside of the building would prefer to see. Again, the specifications of what it would actually look like, or what it would be made out of.
Yeah, and I should have asked that question earlier. I just, but it just triggered it when you mentioned it. So that's definitely something that should be considered in the plan. Okay, thanks.
And I have any other hands? I did have a little one for you. I wasn't sure how long you've been at this neighborhood. You're probably aware of I don't know if I'd call it a predicament, the situation wherein this whole area was approved and rezoned quite a few years ago, before I was even mayor, and I'm coming up on 8 years. Might be a couple of members of council that might have been on council at the time, but it dates back a bit, and then it was destined to be housing for potentially the university, and then that didn't come to pass. So it's no fault of this developer, and so now it's come around. So we're not really dealing with sort of if this can be there. That was kind of decided quite a few years ago, and now it's just kind of more of the form and function of it. So I wasn't sure if you've been there the whole time.
I was at Fleming School for those ones too. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Good. So then you did sort of have your opportunity, because other people, are newer to the neighborhood, something you kind of show up, oh, good, there's a field across the street from me, this is good, and then don't realize that it's destined to be developed and whatnot. So in your case, it's being changed over since you've been there. So.
Yeah, no, for sure. We've been there since 2007.
Thanks for that. And other questions of the presenter? Not Not seeing any others. So thank you very much, Mr. Seelan, for coming out and helping us out here and providing some perspectives.
Thanks.
Thank you. Now, I will check, given our new protocols for COVID, people were asked to register to attend this public hearing. To the best of my knowledge, this was the only other presenter we had. So just verifying with staff, that seems to be the case. So motion to conclude the hearing would be in order. Go ahead, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that the public hearing with respect to the proposed amendment to development concept for one 4-story residential building totaling 48 affordable dwelling units at the property located at 415 25th Street be concluded.
Seconded by Councillor Cullen. Not likely any discussion, so we will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. And we will be dealing with that only a few items down the agenda here, so keep it fresh in your mind. Next item, please, Madam Clerk.
The order of committee reports, Your Worship.
And I don't know that we're made aware of any, but sometimes committees have met recently, and we're happy to take those reports anytime. Councillor Chavoyer, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I'll just give a brief verbal report of the Poverty Committee that met on Wednesday, February 9th. I just wanted to provide Council with a couple of presentations that we heard, and I think it's important for you to understand some of the poverty issues, and that probably we've asked both these organizations at some point to perhaps consider making a presentation to Council because of the importance of the work that they do. The first presentation was from the Helping Hands Soup Kitchen and from Amanda Bray. And she explained the operation that they have there. And I just wanted to make Council aware and the community aware that they're serving 34,000 meals a year. And they're open 252 days. So it's a busy operation. And also to make you aware that with COVID, it's made it incredibly expensive to operate too, because they're spending over $3,000 on plastics. For the serving of the food in takeout containers. So the numbers keep going up, and at some point I think that they're going to come to Council and make a presentation to you to understand how important their operation is, and also to for the public to hear too how important it is to volunteer for the soup kitchen. It kind of piggybacks with the second presentation we had, and it was on the HIFIS data information system, and it's called HIFIS, and what that means is Homeless Individuals and Families Information System. And it's where all the local organizations work collaboratively together, and I think there's, I don't know, I could be wrong, about between 15 and 30 organizations that could potentially provide information into this database to get an understanding of how many homeless people we have in our community. And the numbers too are quite surprising. And if I get the numbers correct from what I had, in 2019, they had 168 folks that were homeless in our community. And as of 2021, the number doubled. There's 376. So we've seen a huge increase in the homeless population. And it's really important that we have this HIFIS system operating, because what it means is if you have somebody that comes into our community or is from our community and then they're without a home. So what that means is they're probably couch surfing, wandering around, and at some point, hopefully, we can provide services to help them out. And that's what happens with the HIFIS system is it's a place for all the organizations to plug in and provide information that they met with this client, and this is what they offered for them, or else this is where they should probably go if they need mental health assistance. And so when you hear the term HIFIS, I just want to tell you that Brandon is definitely plugged into understanding how many homeless folks we have in our community, and that the numbers are growing and growing. And at some point that we might have to lobby other governments too for more assistance to help with the homeless population. So that was kind of, most of what we talked about on February 9th and how important those two organizations are as of the other many that are functioning in Brandon. And so anyways, don't be surprised if you get a presentation from them so you can ask more questions. Councillor Lukey or Councillor Desjardins, did you want to add to the report, to the presentations?
Go ahead, Councillor.
Yeah, and just to kind of add a little bit to Councillor Chaboyer's report, a couple of numbers that kind of stuck out for me was if the homeless population in Brandon was at the same percentage in Winnipeg, it would be 12,000 people. So it gives you an idea of kind of the numbers that's gone up. The other part that I think was enlightening was that the number of people in HIFIS is challenging, but the severity and complexity of their issues has also increased over the years too. So I think that's something to also be aware of. And I think just from our own standpoint, and certainly because it was prior to my term on council, that we actually house the HIFIS system on our server here in the city of Brandon. So I think that's important to note, that we're actually contributing in a small way to helping with that software that they use. So those are just a few things that I had also kind of written down during our meeting. So.
Thank you. And Councillor Desjardins?
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. And I'll just add that the young woman who presented, she is like our HIPAS coordinator, and she really has a really good grasp of the data and the changes in our homeless situation over time, and was able to correlate an increase in homelessness in Brandon to a similar time of when they shut down the homeless encampments in Winnipeg in 2020, which was something that a lot of residents in Brandon were concerned with, but it really didn't come out and wasn't explored, and we didn't look into it further. But I think we should invite her to present to council and the public so she can go into it a bit further. But I think it behooves us to have this conversation with the province and suggest that they might want to help us a little more with our current situation with our homeless population, because it certainly feels like it was passed down from Winnipeg and downstream west to Brandon.
Very interesting. Thank you. Any questions that any member of council would have of the Poverty Committee report of either any of the three councillors? Not seeing any, but thank you very much for that, and some very interesting elements to that report. Any other committee reports? Councillor Cameron, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to council. Just a really brief report. The Western Manitoba Centennial Auditorium's Board of Governors met last week and are happy to share that we are open again to the public as a result of the current public health directives. This week, obviously, Step in Time Dance Studio is hosting their showcase there, of which that I'll spend many nights over the next few nights at. But we also have a lineup of shows coming that might be of interest to residents of the city, especially if you're a fan of 70s and 80s rock and roll, because back to back we pretty well have Hotel California, and then Randy Bachman is coming to Brandon with BTO, Tal Bachman, and then finally later on into the fall we have Queen. So if you're a fan of that 70s and 80s rock, then I think it's a great place to be. But as the auditorium, we're very happy to be open to the public again. Very happy to have gathered last week and looked ahead at hopefully some brighter days for the community and brighter days for the organization as well. So residents can obviously check out wmca.ca/events for all the upcoming events.
Thank you very much. I bet we have some around the table that were big fans of 70s, 80s music, but they probably can't remember.
Right.
I'll open up the floor for any questions that anybody would have, or did you have something to add or to that? No? Okay. Any questions of Councillor Cameron on the Centennial Auditorium report? Great news to just hear everything starting up again, and very exciting. So thanks for that report. And Councillor Fawcett, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. Just thought I would throw in that the library board did meet last week. Do have a couple of questions that maybe came out of that in inquiries, but also the library location in the mall is doing a little expansion and should be open right away. So go there, it should be open again soon.
So just expanding the footprint right where they were?
I believe that it's right where they are. They're just expanding into the next area.
I went by there today and it's open.
Oh.
And it did look bigger to me. So I thought they were moving somewhere, but they just
got into the next space as well.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, they are, it was open and looking good when I went by this afternoon, so. Any questions, Councillor Fawcett, on the library report? And any other committee reports? Councillor Chaboy.
Thank you, Worship. I guess I'll just give a quick little report from the Age Friendly Committee too. We met last Thursday, and I just wanted to highlight an interesting presentation we had with that committee, and it was from part of our subcommittee from Johanna Liceo and Liz McLeod, and they provided a presentation on what's coming across Canada now is a campaign for dementia-friendly communities. And it started federally and it's starting to come to Manitoba. So in the future, I'll give you updates on this because we were all encouraged to take this online course of understanding what a dementia-friendly community would look like, and be it signage and how it can operate effectively in communities, for businesses or public spaces. So I'll provide a further update once our committee has taken the training. And just wanted to let you know that Liz and Johanna are available for workshops, and they are going to be approaching the Chamber of Commerce on the business end and Seniors for Seniors and Prairie Oasis too, to have some presentations on making our community dementia friendly. So I'll keep you posted on that.
Very good. Look forward to that. Any other committee reports? Councillors have been busy, so that's good. Okay, take a motion to accept the committee reports that we did receive, please. Moved by Councillor Chaboyer, seconded by Councillor Lupke. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
The order of inquiries, Your Worship.
We've got a couple. Councillor Cameron, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the City Manager. Just wondering if the City of Brandon could give an update on ski trail grooming at the Wheat City Golf Course. I was contacted by a resident of the University Ward recently seeking further updates on plans to improve path conditions, as they noted they were in poor condition currently.
Very good. So our City Manager, Mr. Ron Bowles, does have a response ready for us, so go ahead, please.
Through Mayor Crest to Councillor Cameron, and there's reason for that, so that's a fair statement. This response is provided by Bryce Wilson, your Manager of Parks. And Mr. Wilson goes on to say, ski trails at the golf course were packed, groomed, and track set on Friday, February 11th. In the past week, so this was written last Friday, in the past week, our machine used to groom trails went down and is getting fixed by a local shop. Also, with the intense amount of snow and winds that we have experienced lately, park staff have been concentrating on snow removal at city buildings, recreation facilities, parks, and pathways. Some park staff have also been loaned to the Streets and Roads Department to assist with their efforts in snow clearing and removal of the snowbanks around the city. It is the park's intention, once the snow machine is repaired, to get out next week, so that's the week of February 21st, to groom and track set the city ski trails. We also ask residents that are visiting the golf course, ski trails, that if they are walking, please stay off the track set trails. There is room beside the track set trails for walkers. Signage is being was installed last week, asking walkers to stay off the track set ski trails. Thank you.
Thank you. And go ahead. Yep.
Thank you, Your Worship. Second one this evening, through Your Worship to the City Manager. I was contacted by a couple of residents of the ward recently with regards to snow clearing. Obviously, snow to snow here. So this past Friday's snow event, and I could add in the weekend snow event as well, does significantly impact the current initiatives as far as snow clearing. But wondering if we could get an update on removal of meridian corner piles as well as sidewalk maintenance to improve walkability in the city. Further, if a residential street has been missed in snow clearing efforts, I was hoping the city manager could share the best channels for residents to reach out to the city with regards to that.
Okay, thank you for that. And again, Matt, back to Mr. Bowles for a report for us on that.
So through yourself, Mayor Kress, to Councillor Cameron. This response is provided by Pam Richardson, your Director of Public Works. Streets and Roads staff are currently working to complete residential snow plowing and removing ruts on streets at this time. It is anticipated that residential snow plowing will be completed early the week of February the 28th, as long as additional accumulations or mechanical breakdowns do not occur. So that's the plans. Upon completion of plowing, all staff will be focusing on removing and hauling away snow from three main areas: intersections, crosswalks, and residential driveways and piles on front of lawns, in that order. The goal will be to improve sight lines, increase visibility, and assist safety on streets for drivers and pedestrians as best as possible. For the past 3 weeks, additional crews throughout the night, made up of both city staff and hired contractors, have worked to remove a large portion of snow from major traffic routes throughout the city. It is estimated to date that approximately 900 semi-loads of snow have been removed, which is well over the amount which was normally removed in any time in recent years. In addition, staff are continually monitoring and clearing both walking paths and sidewalks throughout the city. Staff and equipment are set to continuously clear snow and apply sand to locations on designated routes. Given the recent warm weather the city has experienced, so that was this past week, some sidewalks and pathways are not ideal due to ice buildup. This is extremely difficult for the department to resolve, but we are working on sanding locations as best as possible. Residents are asked to please use caution when out walking as conditions continue to change due to winter fluctuations. So regarding communication, residents are asked to refer to the snow map on the city's website at www.snowmap.brandon.ca and encourage them to sign up for a text notification feature when a snow event has started on the city site. But to answer your question, there's two phone numbers they can also call. The first phone number is for during business hours, and it is, so this would be the most direct route during business hours. So it's 204-729-2290. And in evenings, of course, 24 hours, 204-729-2285. Thank you.
Press 1. 729-2285 and then press 1.
Thank you for that.
I never phoned it, so that's important information. Thank you very much. Did that finish up there, Councillor Cameron?
I have one more, Your Worship, but I'll wait for Councillor Fawcett's.
Okay, so Councillor Fawcett, go ahead.
Thank you, through Your Worship. We are working on short and long-term plans for the Library and Art Gallery of Southwestern Manitoba building. Is there anything we could share with the public around those plans?
Very good. Thanks for that inquiry. And again, back to Mr. Bowles for a response.
Mayor Crest, thank you, Councillor Fawcett, for that question. Council is taking matters involving the library and the Arts Gallery of Southwest Manitoba seriously and is committed to short and long-term solutions. In the short term, the Brandon Police Service has just established a liaison to work directly with library representatives. Further, Public Works have been working with the Art Gallery staff to repair vandalism and ensure building security. And they will be following up with this group to ensure that their needs are taken care of. So that was today. In the long term, proposed solutions, the City of Brandon is also working on developing an upgrade and renewal plan for the facility. So that's the library and art gallery and maybe potentially even the museum. We're working directly with the Community Wellness Collaborative and other nonprofit organizations working in the downtown. We are advocating with the province for increased services to address mental health, addiction, and homelessness. We have funded a downtown policing unit. We are providing a designated downtown security team, which is working very well. Council has established a downtown wellness and safety task force to actively and swiftly provide council with recommendations. And this year during the budget process, council designated additional funding for more downtown improvements. Improvements will be incremental, some with immediate impact, but most for long-term sustainability. We all understand that it is frustrating for organizations that operate in the core area of downtown. The City of Brandon is committed to their role of being part of the solution. Thank you.
Okay. And then go ahead, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, through your worship. Just one that came up this afternoon. I was hoping the city manager could take under advisement and perhaps advise back to council. Have a couple of concerns with where residents are raising, obviously coming back to snow again, but if you could advise back just as around the bylaw implications or management on residents expelling snow onto neighbors' yards. That's something that has been raised as a challenge in that people are using snow blowers and they're storing the snow on their neighbor's yard. So just wondering if you could come back at some point and just sort of give us an update as to what bylaw implications are around that. So.
Okay. Absolutely. Take that under advisement. And Councillor Cullen was aware of an inquiry he did have that came up after the deadline, but we didn't know it was coming. So go ahead, Councillor Cullen.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. We have a small recurring problem with a section of sidewalk that is located between Regent and Victoria Avenue on Fotheringham Drive. We have a set of sidewalks on one side and a set of sidewalks on the other side, both on the east and the west side. It seems like when we run the plows down, we sort of catch one, but we don't catch the other, and they kind of alternate back and forth as far as which area gets cleaned. This one I've been trying to work on for quite a few years, and it seems that it just seems to recur. So I'm asking that maybe if we can make an effort to sort of figure this out on the maps and make sure that we catch both sides. It is a feeder sidewalk that comes into River Heights School, and one feeds the crosswalk that runs across Victoria Avenue. So if it's missed on the Victoria Avenue side, on the crosswalk side, the kids would come across the crosswalk and end up in a snowbank. And if it goes the other side that's missed, anybody coming down the walking paths on the other side on Victoria Avenue all of a sudden find themselves with no place to go. So if we wouldn't mind taking a look at that, that would be great. And it's just something that seems to happen where we're either catching one side or the other side, but not both sides.
Thank you. Did you have anything you wanted to add, or are you going to take that under advisement? Okay, thank you. And Councillor Chaboy.
Thank you, Worship. I guess you'll have to take this one under advisement too, but the city did an incredible job of from the traffic circle at Maryland, that's up near Maryland School, right up to Aberdeen Avenue, and they made a new sidewalk on the west side, but they stopped at Aberdeen. Meanwhile, there's 2 blocks from Aberdeen to Richmond Avenue that are on a real busy collector route, and in those 2 blocks, it's not even a sidewalk, it's just a line on the road that kind of says this is a bike path, walking trail. It's very narrow, and you can't use it properly, and it's very dangerous for children at the best of times, at summertime. So now the situation is even worse with snow, because the snow gets pushed back off the street for the vehicles, and there's nowhere for anyone to walk in that 2-block range. So what I'm asking the city is to really revisit that small section. I know, Patrick, you know the area well too. It's extremely narrow, that little dedication they have for pedestrians, and it needs to be larger. For winter, the snow either has to be pushed back onto the properties, and there's room for snow to get pushed back there. But in the long term, we need a proper sidewalk there, and maybe even some bollards like they have along Aberdeen right up to Canadian Tire 18th Street, you know, where you can definitely see where the division is. I know when we look at Pacific Avenue, we're going to be looking at having a dedicated sidewalk or something, or a bike lane. There's got to be a separation from pedestrians to the traffic, especially when they're collector routes. And so I would like city, if you could look at those 2 specific blocks, the 15 and 1600 block, to see how we can rectify this problem that seems to just be getting worse as the south keeps growing in traffic and pedestrians. It's just a bad mix in those 2 blocks.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and so absolutely, we'll take it under advisement, but just to remind council that one of the discussions at budget time from the engineering department was having a conversation with council about which roads and whatnot were planned to get done, and sidewalks as well, so we can just include this in that discussion.
Perfect, thanks.
Good, thank you. Any other inquiries that we may not have been aware of? I believe that has it covered, so thank you very much. Next item of business, Madam Clerk.
The order of announcements, Your Worship.
Announcements, Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Worship. Keeping in the theme of snow, I just wanted to take an opportunity before it starts to melt to publicly recognize volunteers who have been dealing with near record amounts of snow at the 6 community centers that put in ice, and they're clearing anywhere from 15,000 to 35,000 square feet of ice virtually daily. And one in particular I can think of, Terry Drew, has been doing it for I don't know how many years, and he's probably well past the limit with snow. So I just wanted to let the public realize that those are all volunteer-run places that are running it with shoestring budgets and a couple of shovels. So if you see some of those guys out there, give them a wave and thank them.
Thank you for that. They are certainly unsung heroes in our community for sure, and always have been back when I was a little kid. And it's just wonderful in our community that we have people that are prepared to step up like that year after year, especially in a year like this. So thanks for that, Councillor Parker. Other announcements? Not seeing any others. Thank you for that. And next item, please.
Under the order of general business, Your Worship, we have an application to subdivide 1910 Hamilton Avenue.
Thank you. I suspect that we do have a administration report on this, so maybe we'll take that before we entertain the motion on this. This may be a difficult one. Administration is sort of obliged to give us one recommendation, but there's seems to be, certainly extenuating circumstances. So am I correct that administration are ready to present? Yeah. So go ahead, please. I think you're muted there, Mr. Nicol.
What to be?
Hang on a minute. We're just working on the technology there, Ryan. Go ahead, Ryan. No. Well, one of the other people on Teams say they can hear him on Teams. We just Just can't get you on
Looks
the,
like the audio is off there, Amber.
Ask him to try again.
try that now, Ryan?
Hello?
Yeah. There you go. Good.
Hey.
Okay, for the third time, I'll give you a brief overview and share my screen quick. So as Mr. Burgess presented, this is a little bit of a tricky one. It's tricky for the developer in the city, and I think MI as well. The request to subdivide the commercial lot there fronting the Trans-Canada Highway is certainly in compliance with our development plan. We'd like to see additional development up there, but also challenging because of some other policies in development plan requiring that the city plan around the highway functional alignment. The highway functional alignment that's shown here on my map has been in place for many years. I think it's been referred to the 20-year plan 20 years ago, and it's still the 20-year plan. So we don't know exactly what date MI plans on constructing this. We do know that there's been some discussions about options for this alignment, but as of now, this is what's still adopted in the development plan, and to our most recent understanding, this is still the most recent plan they're working on. When this was originally applied for, we did work with the applicant to adjust the subdivision to keep the land out of the land that was required from MI. So MI stated they do not need this portion of land for development, but stating that that doesn't change the fact that based on the design, MI is objecting to the request because they will not be able to access the property. So from a professional planning perspective, we cannot recommend approval for the subdivision of land that has no access. I'm sure council understands the problems that will create. There's certain criteria that must be met for subdivision to be approved, and access is one of them. In this case, the city of Brandon is not the access authority, it's MI, and we're responsible to circulate to them. So I would state, although city council could approve it, it would be unwise because it would be not in compliance with our development plan, which clearly states MI is the approval authority for access. We did propose an alternative to the proponent. They touched on it, where we proposed the access coming through the Husky site to the east. My understanding that that was not a desirable solution for reasons outlined by the applicant, but also because it really puts them their subdivision completely contingent onto the site to the east, which they weren't comfortable with. So we did not proceed with that recommendation. If city council does choose to reject, which is staff's recommendation, the applicant would have the opportunity, as all applicants, to appeal to the municipal board, which could make a decision if this could be approved or not. This is very challenging because from a city perspective, the developer's right. We want to see development occur in this area, and the highway alignment has proposed some restrictions on development occurring, not just on this property, but other properties on the North Hill. We have followed up with the province, as Councillor Fawcett stated we should, but we've been on that multiple times trying to get clarity on what the province's plans are, and if their plans are this, how they plan on moving it forward. It does seem like it's very challenging for property owners where MI is objecting to requests, but then at the same time is not looking to purchase land. It seems like some owners are in a little bit of a no-win situation, so we appreciate the frustration. But saying that, although we appreciate the frustration, we also have a responsibility to implement our development plan, which once again, MI is the approval authority for access, which is why administration is recommending this application be rejected. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nicol. So we will start with the ward councillor, Councillor Fawcett. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan, and I appreciate that. Now, I'm assuming that MI also has planners, and, you know, the planners have to be able to come up with some way to access developable property. I don't know what we can do in the sense of lobbying our other politicians at the other level or meeting with MI. I know you guys have, but you know, what are they sort of suggesting here? Is this is not developable land, according to them?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Fawcett, MI was agreeable to access through the Husky site to the east, but stating that, as you know, Councillor Fawcett, there's requirements for designing the site, and then there's grade issues. So what they're saying is the road won't be able, from a grade perspective, to get to the property, which is why that access through the east was the only option. And then the applicant was stating that that's likely not a good option for their site, which is why we settled on the rejection.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. And I guess we know through some history and some of our plans in the city that having to make arrangements and agreements to access through other private property has not always been the best solution either. But I am curious because, you know, we do want to see something go ahead up there. I can imagine there would be people that would want to be on the highway. I don't know if you have any suggestions from your end of what we can do on our end to try to get this moving, because we have had frustrations with this plan, well, for decades. Down 18th Street, there's issues. There's ongoing problems here. Maybe between the city manager, yourself, and that, they may be able to find routes that politically we can put some expedience to, or just something in place that we can actually start doing some work in these areas, because otherwise we're held hostage by the province.
Yeah, fair enough, Councillor Fawcett. And Mayor Kress can speak to it further, but we did follow up with the province within the last, I think, 4 months or so. And maybe it was even 6 months ago, time flies. And we did have a meeting about explaining the challenges that our property owners are having, including the city, in terms of developing the North Hill. And we kind of were expecting some level of follow-up, which we haven't received yet. Hopefully we still get that. But certainly the province, I think, is well aware at the highest levels of the concerns of the city of Brandon and the need for some decisions being made in relation to the functional.
Thank you. Also comments after, but Councillor Cullen is next. Go ahead.
Thank you, through you to Mr. Nicol. This has been an ongoing problem for many years right now. I can remember when I first saw this plan, and it created quite a bit of problems with the golf course and to the other side, and also on First Street, and just basically in general for development. If you don't know where the road's going, it's extremely hard to sort of figure out where a developer should invest and those kind of things. And literally, this particular chunk of land has been kind of stuck in la-la land now it was a 10-year plan back then that turned into the 20-year plan, and now it's the 20-year plan that might be done in 20 years. So, I mean, literally, this piece of property could not be developed or not be changed again for another 20 years based on our knowledge or our experience from what's going on with the province. I don't think it's fair for the developer, to not have the ability to develop this. Highway commercial is valuable in this town, and I think, you know, in our case, if we're looking for taxation and growth, we need to deal with this. So you're telling me that, okay, so this original plan hasn't changed at all over the last 20 years. Is that correct, Ryan?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Cullen. I mean, there's probably some little tweaks here and there, but like the overall concept is the same. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and even the land right now that where the traffic circle or the actual cloverleaf would be positioned. Does the province own that land, or does the developer own that land right now?
Through your worship, the council, my understanding is that land is still privately held, and recently the province has not been pursuing any additional land acquisition.
Right. So, in other words, they've kind of called dibs on this piece of property, but really there's no, it's been going on for 20 years. The value of the land is completely stuck in limbo. So, again, I totally understand, though, that that's how you have to do it. You have to sort of call dibs on it. If that's your plan, is you're going to drop a cloverleaf in there, it'd be extremely not a good idea on behalf of Brandon Planning to throw a house or a building or a hotel or anything smack dab in the middle of where a cloverleaf is going to go. So I understand that, but there has to be some sort of an obligation. This thing has been going on for 20 years plus. It's like, and again, even First Street, I think that First Street is right now is being held back because people don't know what's happening there. So I know that provincial governments change and everything changed, but this plan seems to, it doesn't. It's a placeholder. It's dropped in there. But there's nothing built, so therefore, to sort of work with the province right now and sort of figure out whether we can get access or how to get access to this makes total sense. And we sure don't want to be going through somebody else's property to get access. We've already done that, been there, that didn't work out well. So I don't know what's the next step, Brian. Like how do you take a 20-year plan that's been stuck in la la land and make it so that we can develop? Because again, it sounds like we're in a great. We have no problem allotting them the land they need in order to put in the cloverleaf. But if it's landlocked and you can't get to it, what's the process of our planning department and their planning department getting this to the next phase without having to go through some other person's land? How can we speak for Husky saying that with our access would have to be through there? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Cullen, I wish I had a magic solution to this, but it's been the same problem we've been dealing with for many years. The one item that we are working on, as council knows, is a new city plan, which will be the development plan for the city of Brandon. And part of it, that is reaching out to the province, which we're doing right now, to create a working group with provincial departments, which will include a discussion around these policies as relates to different provincial interests, including highways, mines and minerals, and other provincial interests, to discuss how these policies get built into the new development plan. That in no way helps the current applicant because they fall under the existing development plan of what they applied for. And regardless of our development plan, MI is still the authority and is still going to kind of push their interest. But I do hope that through that city plan, we can bring up this discussion once more. But once again, the city of Brandon as a subdivision approval authority has been given responsibility up by the province to follow our development plan. So as much as maybe we don't want to, we still have a responsibility to follow the approved policies.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I had myself down, and then Councillor Lupke was coming up. So a question I had for you, Ryan, and then I'll have some comments afterwards. And you may have, partly tailed off on it in your last statement there. On one end, it's a privilege that we do possess the authority to do subdivisions. So we want to obviously take that seriously and not, sort of offend the provincial process by just sort of stepping out of line. And on the other hand, if we were to approve this instead of rejecting it, it is a piece of property that is not required by even this long-term highway plan, and so the only thing that really would suggest that we shouldn't approve it is because the developer currently doesn't have access, and it's not suitable to approve a subdivision that doesn't have access, or is it we can approve it and he'll have to figure out the access himself. For example, I guess if he had to, the only thing that ever occurred, if he had to make an arrangement with the neighboring property owner, like Councilor Cullen said, I think that would be not an ideal, and or, appealing to the, to MI to grant him access. It does sound like he has met with the new minister. Is a new individual that's been minister just a month or two, so the developer has already taken it up with him, and maybe some solution will be found. But are we either sort of unlawful or inappropriate to approve this subdivision given the fact that it doesn't have access, Ryan?
Yeah, to your worship, like access is one of the requirements of looking at a subdivision, and what am I saying is due to their functional plan is that the grade of the road coming off that would not lend itself to accessing the property. So even if it was something we just deferred, that would be questionable if we're really doing our role as a subdivision authority properly. We did discuss options going through this and kind of haggled about them internally. I kind of debated bringing this on as approval subject to a condition that the applicant retain approval from Manitoba Infrastructure, but then that just felt like passing the buck to something that had already, Manitoba Infrastructure was already clear on their position. So for us just to approve it subject to a addition to something that they already said they objected to, I don't know how beneficial that would be. And with the subdivision rejection, it gives the opportunity for the applicant to go to the municipal board, where if they just went to MI, they're just subject to their administrative approval process. So perhaps they don't have as much flexibility under the appeals to go to a third party.
And next question, would there be any merit in, rather than rejecting it, and then, of course, rather than approving it, which may be inappropriate, but we might, do we have the ability to table this subject to discussions that could take place with the province, then bring it back to council following that point in time? That way we've not actually rejected it so that it has to be reapplied for, but it would give us an opportunity to see whether we could, not just for this, but there's lots of issues in that area that are tangled up in this in highways plan. And I don't, I'm going to later sound a little more cranky about highways, but I'm not really. I mean, they perform a very important function, and we're happy that they want to treat our vicinity very seriously and, consider significant investments and make traffic continue to be smooth and safe. So is tabling or deferring this application an option to us, Ryan?
Absolutely. Council could certainly, and Heather could provide the proper wording. The only point that I would put out there is that I don't think you can pick a date to have it returned for, just because of the uncertainty with engaging with MI. It would probably have to be left a little bit open to say it's going to be tabled to allow for further discussions between the city and MI for, report back and presentation of the subdivision at a further date.
I agree. City clerk will hate that, but we'll have to talk nice to her. And Councillor Lupke, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. That was actually the one question I was going to have, is regarding the tabling this until we could get more information from MI. I didn't know you could pass the buck up, but it only went the other way.
See if we can.
The question I had, and it's just, it's kind of similar. I kind of think about it the same way we talk about the water reservoir, in that if nothing's going to happen for the next 20 years, I just wonder why we wouldn't go ahead and do something like this and get it going, and then kind of deal with it when the time comes when they finally do work on the highway, whenever that might be. The question I had, Ryan, was, and it just now, as you said it, like it almost sounds like if we were to reject this and it went as an appeal to the municipal board, might actually be beneficial to the developer. Am I reading into that too much, or is that kind of what your thought process might be.
Yeah, it's hard to say what's the beneficial to the developer here. I think the benefit of this process is it's kind of reintroduced this as a problem. It's one that we were already aware of, but it's just another example. I don't mind the tabling option being proposed. The only item that I would kind of caution that probably needs to go through there, it would need to be done at a higher level than a staffing level to have those conversations. Just because we've already gone through those staffing level conversations through this process, and MI was like very clear on their position at an administrative level.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. My fear would be rejecting it, saying, feeling like we're going to do the developer a favor because then he can appeal it to the municipal board, but then it goes to the municipal board having been rejected by the municipality, and again, we'd almost have to be, yeah, we rejected it, but we really want it. So I'd be a little fearful of that, of just, that's goes in, they take those into account. They say, well, your own municipality rejected it, and now you want us to overturn them. They don't like to do that. Councillor Fawcett.
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. I think that I'm agreeing with Mayor Crest here, and that we should be tabling it, and I think we should put a bit of a time frame on it, and maybe it even is about 6 months. But my goodness, like at least we could have something. Maybe MI is just that they're stuck with it, but at least we can sit down with them and discuss that, because in all due respect to Mr. Burgess, who is the current developer there, it isn't just about this particular development. It is about a bigger picture on First Street and 18th Street. It's finally after all these years, we do have the province talking with our department to maybe make sure our intersections on the highway at 18th and First Street and number 1 highway are cleaned up and clear. I hate to do this because I think Brandon has a great relationship with the province. And we do things really well, but this is a kind of what would Winnipeg do feeling, and I'd like to pursue that a little bit. So if we were able to table it, and I'd say put it at 6 months, and if it comes back at 6 months and our response is the MI hasn't got back to us, that might be a little statement in itself. I don't know. So I am kind of thinking of what would Winnipeg do approach to this. And we have a good relationship. I hope we can find something. May not even be the result we want for this, but if we can find something bigger going forward that can actually set us in a direction, we do need to. It is quite important. So with that, I would consider tabling this.
Yeah, give me a minute. Once the tabling motion comes on, we can't really debate.
Oh, we haven't even put it on the table yet.
Pardon?
We haven't even put it on the table yet.
True. Well, that's a very good point. So we can't table it, the motion. See, the city clerk walks up and we're already running amok. I was expecting you were going to say we're going to consider what Winnipeg would do and then follow a path completely different. But
that may be the case. That may be the case. I just want to know what would they do.
They don't necessarily always have the patent on how to deal with the problem. So,
100%. That's what I'd just like to know what they would do.
So among some of the rest of you, I'm also a bit of a storyteller, so I'm going to go ahead and tell this. And some of you are talking about 10 and 20 years. So as you know, many of you know, my first big boy job was manager of the Chamber of Commerce. I started when I was 21 years old. And early into that...
Sorry.
Okay. Just have a little statement here. The city clerk just had some... good personal news, so we're happy for her. I won't say any more right now. At any rate, so at the time, Manitoba Highways were considering major changes to the Trans-Canada Highway area between 1st and 18th Street, and it was very upsetting and providing quite a bit of upheaval to all of the merchants that were up there, and they Highways did have a hearing. This will show you how far back it goes, at Harry's Ukrainian Kitchen. So I'm there representing the chamber and representing our members that are up there. So we're now talking kind of 40 years ago. I'm sorry, I'm kind of aging myself. I'm pretty sure I've outlasted all of those engineers, not that were there at the time. And So to this day, 40 years later, very little has happened, and all these businesses were being put on kind of hold, and we're kind of still doing that. And the other part of this, I know they need to do planning and advanced planning, and I respect that. But the bit of a peculiar part of this is that taking the point of view, okay, at some point in time, we're going to build here. It's going to go through your property, and it might be 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And in that period of time, you're going to hold it for me. I'll be obliged to buy that from you when the time comes. But in the meantime, basically they sterilize the property. Nobody can do anything. The community can't really grow and kind of keep developing. We don't know where it's going to go. So it's basically just sort of on hold. It's just kind of sterilized. And yet, even the developer isn't even kind of compensated. Like they have to just kind of sit on that for years and years, not being compensated until such point in time. So it's fair enough if they say, we're going to build that, and then they have to buy the land, and now they've got the land stowed away for when they're going to build. That's it. It's got its own peculiarities, but it's reasonably fair. They're sort of putting their money where their mouth is. But to sterilize the property and make owners hold that property for them until they're ready is kind of absurd, to be honest with you. So all that said, naturally, when the motion's put on the floor and what will sound like a tabling motion, and I'm going to ask the city clerk for some advice here, if she can muster up her wisdom and senses at this given moment. But that I think we can pursue this to the province on behalf of the much bigger picture, I might add, and not just on behalf of this one little sliver of property, as Councillor Foss is alluding. So, Madam Clerk, I think the councillors are interested in tabling this. We haven't put a motion on the floor yet, but the motion that's recommended is to reject it. Are we able to just put a tabling motion that just tables the consideration of the application, or we have to put the motion on and then a motion to table it?
So through your worship and council, there is no motion on the table yet. This is strictly a recommendation from council or from administration to reject the application. So council can table the matter at hand. The only codicil to that is it would have to be, the longest you could table it would be to the end of your term.
6 months, we're thinking.
So from there on, it would fall off the table, is what we call it.
Yeah. Well, that'd be preferable that we don't have a motion on the table that we were going to reject or we're going to approve. We're just tabling the whole matter while we pursue considerations with the province.
Okay.
You want to make something like that, Councillor Foss, or do you?
Yeah, okay, so through your worship, just would I be reading out that we table the...
You can table consideration of the...
Table consideration of the motion to reject the application to subdivide, or not even, we don't like to reject.
You can just table consideration of the application.
Subdivide 1910 Hamilton Avenue to create one lot in the CHW commercial highway zone.
Very good. Is there a seconder on that? Councillor Lupke. And we've been having a fair bit of discussion, but I'm not going to cut it off. What discussion, any discussion you'd like to have on this?
Well, through your worship, now did we put there, I want to just check with Grandma City Clerk here, if we can put 6 months onto that.
You can. It's available for bringing off the table any time up until the end of your term. So you don't have to have a specific date.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I would like to see it though. I don't want it to lapse.
Want it to, yeah.
I'd like to have a date that either we come back and say the province has not met with us.
So you can say no later than.
Later than. No later than the end of the term. The extreme, but.
What if you said 6 months?
Let's go 6 months.
On October 23rd, and we're done in 2 days and having to deal with it. If we say 6 months, it'll give us 2 months before the end of the term.
Yeah, that's in August, and our August meeting would be a great time.
Okay.
I think likes to meet in the summer with people. That's just what I've heard.
Okay, so we were a little bit unorthodox in crafting that motion. So the motion that I'm presuming Councillor Fawcett has made is that the application to subdivide 1910 Hamilton Avenue shall be, that the matter be tabled for a period of up to 6 months. Okay. And that was seconded by Councillor Lupke. And I don't think we actually debate a tabling motion anyways. So we were just having a discussion over the wording. So everyone understands the wording. Ready for the question then? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And, okay, next item, Madam Clerk.
Is the amendment to the development agreement for 415 25th Street.
And again, I'm sure, I don't know if we're going to have a further presentation because we had a presentation from Mr. Nickel at the prior to the hearing, so I'm guessing he'll be available for questions. So I think we're eligible to at least put the motion on the floor, and then under discussion we'll uncover any questions and debate on that. Did you want to put that on the floor, Councillor Cameron? Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that the concept plan is attached to the report from the Planning and Buildings dated February 11th, 2022 be approved with respect to the development of 415 25th Street and 2350 Louise Avenue. That the City of Brandon execute a development agreement amendment with 7571861 Manitoba Limited for 415 25th Street and 2350 Louise Avenue with the following conditions. Would you like me to list the conditions, or?
You could probably say as listed.
As listed.
Okay.
Thank you, yeah.
And seconder, please. Councillor Fawcett. Mover wish to speak?
Yes, Your Worship, if I may. I do have sort of a closing to this as well, but I do have a couple of questions for Mr. Nickel, if I may.
Okay, get him back on here. I presume he's handy. There he is.
Thank you, through Your Worship, through you to Mr. Nickel. Obviously, a couple of the questions that I had this evening did come up already, and I appreciate other members of council for answering those. Just have another couple of points or questions that I've had residents raise with regards to this property. First and foremost, I would say that one of the biggest considerations is the drainage channel that's underneath where the build is going to occur, and whether there's adequate storm surge capability in the drainage channel there. Obviously, that area of the city does already have some complications with regards to drainage. So I'm just wondering if your presentation from the developer gave you a level of comfort in that the drainage would be adequately addressed by increasing the capacity by another 48 units in a relatively small area.
Yeah, through your worship, to Councillor Cameron. The drainage question is this going to make it worse? No, they have to still manage their drainage on site, so they won't be permitted just to dump in the system at an uncontrolled rate. They'll still have to manage their post-development flows to equal their pre-development flows into the system. But it's likely not going to improve the situation. That would need to be done through other improvements to the system.
Okay, we can open the floor to questions and debate. Councillor Fawcett, go ahead.
Thank you, through your worship. These are a couple of little things I just wonder, they may be more on us than them, but we were talking about that street parking and that's not really an issue for the development, but it is something that would be nice to see us follow up with and look at with this. So I don't, I guess just sort of to have it on the record, would we look at street parking with coinciding with this development? Just to be on the record, it's not something we would have in here.
Right.
The other question is, and Ryan might be able to tell me this, there is in condition number 2 there with the sidewalk on the east side of 25th Street from the existing sidewalk. There is some trees on that side. And sometimes our sidewalks, the way we put them in, trees have to go, like it depends, it can be on the road, is it away from how far away from the road is it? If we could try to have them accommodate keeping those trees in there, which often for a new development is quite an upside to have mature trees. But again, that might be just as a recommendation from staff to try to keep the existing trees. They have no obligation. It doesn't say they do. But if we can work with them a little bit, it would be appreciated, because sometimes we have guidelines that put them right through where the trees are, and maybe we can work with it. So those are two things that are probably more on the city end. Otherwise, the reality is I'm reasonably comfortable with a lot of this.
Okay, and I Councillor Cameron and then Councillor Lupke.
Thank you, through your worship. Just another question with regards to the parking as well. Through you to Mr. Nickel. First and foremost, Mr. Nickel, do we have to have somewhere in this development agreement as listed here that the street level parking that or the commercial parking that they're going to provide is listed in writing there? And second, I was just wondering some clarity, because the numbers haven't jived completely with it this evening, in that there is mentions in the supporting documents of both 20 and 30 stalls. 20 on some of the city documents that are provided, and then 30 stalls provided from the developer, which also matches up with the drawing. So I just wanted some clarity on that prior to moving forward with this, that we do have clarity that it is 30 stalls that they're providing as opposed to 20, because I think that also is a big consideration, as Mr. Seeland shared this evening, with regards to some of the challenges on 25th and then obviously on Louise as well. So if you could just provide some clarity as to whether it's 20 or 30 stalls.
Yeah, sorry, through your worship, to Councillor Cameron. No, yeah, I understand that confusion. Just looking at the plans here, I think I defer to the developer knowing their plan better than our report, that it would be the 30 spaces. Council certainly could add that as a condition. However, the development's getting approved in general compliance with the plan, and that's getting attached to the development agreement that shows the parking. I'm fairly confident we can work with the developer to achieve the parking as proposed.
Through your worship, I appreciate that. I'd like to say I do appreciate that clarity, because it is two different numbers in there, albeit one of them does come from the public consultation. So I appreciate that, and I don't necessarily feel that needs to be in there expressly written, but it is a strong consideration, obviously, for the residents there, as well as both the commercial spaces. So appreciate the clarity on that.
And Councillor Lupke.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Mr. Nickel. Ryan, I might have misheard you during the public hearing process, but I thought you had said that one of the changes with regards to the sidewalk on the east side of 25th was to accommodate the trees that were there that are existing already. So can you just kind of confirm that, or was I thinking of something else?
Worship, to Councillor Lupke, that is correct. That clause was changed just to ensure the width of the sidewalk met our current standards, and talking to engineering, typically we like to do it separated from the street just because of snow clearing and having that buffer. But in this case, with the desire to protect the trees, putting it pinned to the curb seemed like a better option, and that's certainly something we'll work with the developer on either way, especially since council just adopted the new tree protection bylaw. So we'll be working to ensure those trees are preserved where possible.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't have other hands up, so I'm going to dive in. probably don't have questions asked, but no, just to, debate the motion, if you will, call it that. So I'm going to support the motion and the approval of this, and I do so with the utmost respect for the neighbors, and particularly the gentleman that did present to us. And I looked at this, very closely. I always know that it is, any change to a neighborhood is, provides some upheaval, and certainly needs to be taken with a high degree of seriousness. I also feel that the developers also tried to take that as similarly seriously and tried to mitigate any concerns that the residents would have, whether it be with respect to landscaping and positioning of the building to be as conducive as possible, accommodating, adding parking spaces to the commercial development. So again, I always like it when the neighborhood and the developer can, work together as much as possible. Sometimes you can't get every single thing contained. This particular development does stretch back for quite a few years. It was rezoned and approved many years ago. The concept that was planned at the time, didn't proceed. So this is an alternate concept. It is affordable housing, not low-income housing, I guess the developer indicated. So it's a good-looking development. It probably is fairly suitable to the neighborhood. Should fit in, and the developer also has shown himself to be a quality developer. Has developed two high-quality commercial buildings, right adjacent, and shows his commitment to doing a nice job, and I would expect this one wouldn't be any different. So I do believe that between our own staff in planning and the developer, that they've tried to mitigate as many of the concerns by evidence of the fact that we only did have one presenter, and he did make a nice presentation, but we didn't have a dozen people here that are apparently are concerned. Maybe Councillor Cameron, I think it's heard from a few more than that, but the hearing is the hearing, and that's what we heard. So all of that said, I do believe it's appropriate to proceed, and I will be voting in favor of it. Other, Councillor Parker, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too would vote in favor of this, and just for, I guess, a simple point that you sort of skirted around there a little bit, but I wanted to point out, and while the neighbors have an investment in that block, in their own properties, I would argue that the developer has a considerably larger investment in that particular block and has a vested interest in making sure that everything's done properly and of high quality, and to ensure that his investment is protected as well. So I think they can rest assured that he's going to do everything at to the proper standards and conform and work to be a good neighbor. So
thank you for that. Other comments, Councillor Chaboyer?
Thank you, Worship. I'll support this development as well, but with the understanding too that we have a relationship with our community and the developers. So having said that, I hope that the city will also consider making sure that they take a close look once the building is up to make sure that there isn't a lot of on-street parking, and also that it aesthetically looks good in the neighborhood, and the green space, the trees are going to be accommodated the way we visualize it to be in that neighborhood. Then I would support it, and I think it's a good mix. It's a beautiful looking building, but at the same time I feel like we have to have a responsibility to ensure that we don't have a lot of on-street parking, or else we either restrict the parking and we take a close look at that stop sign location, so it will be a win-win for the neighborhood and the city and the developer.
Thank you. I didn't notice any other hands up. Councillor Cullen, go ahead.
No, thank you, Your Worship. I will be supporting this motion as well. Probably my biggest concern has always been the additional height. 4-story building throws a little bit more of a shadow than the 3-story. However, when it's kind of a trade-off where if, okay, you go taller, you end up with more parking spots and the footprint of the building is smaller, so therefore you're a little bit, your setback's a little bit bigger. So I guess the trade-off there is that, okay, go taller and end up with more parking and more green space and more setbacks. So I'll be supporting this, and hopefully the building will add to the neighborhood, and I think it's at this point it's the best thing to do is to go higher and retain the green space and the setback, and it seems to be centrally located in the lot, so I think it's time will tell when we take a look at it and sort of see how it works into that whole process.
Thank you. On that note, you reminded me, Councillor Cullen, that the rendering that the developer provided, as much as it's a 4-story building, the fact that he made it a flat roof building, to me makes it equivalent of a 3-story with a regular pitched roof on it, and so the rendering is not as imposingly tall as it might have been given the flat roof. It was kind of like, you know, flopping a story off the top of that, which I thought was probably considerate to the point you're making. So, any other discussion before we ready for the question? I'm going to let the mover close, but I want to make sure that everybody else has had their say. So go ahead and close, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Council, this has been one that's been an incredibly challenging project with many different sort of facets to it. You know, there's times as a member of Council that we don't always vote with our own feelings, but we park our own feelings and vote on behalf of the residents that have asked us to represent them. So I'm not going to support the motion this evening, but I wanted to give a little bit of a reason why. You know, and this is no fault of our own planning department and no fault of the developer as well, but I feel that the process itself was somewhat flawed. Although the initial approval was sought and received in 2013, which was prior to my time on council, it still has caused some hardship on residents near the property as almost a decade has passed since that consultation. At the end of the day, we know this project will move forward this evening, and know the proponent has done their due diligence in receiving residents' feedback from the recent public consultations and then again this evening. But it does, to me, come a little bit late in the process for many of the residents who felt unable to provide feedback on a development that was ultimately decided upon a decade prior to some of them purchasing their homes or moving into the neighborhood. Once again, no fault, I believe, to the developer, because the developer has been forthright with the residents of the area in providing that consultation and providing a space that hopefully is conducive to that area. But this evening I won't be supporting it, just because the feedback I did receive from the residents, I feel it's important. However, symbolically, that I do proceed with the vote that way, just as the residents have asked me to proceed this way, and it's something that, you know, I feel passionate about. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak to that.
Good. Thanks for that, Councillor Cameron. So I think we're ready for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. Did you want the minutes to reflect your having voted against it?
Yes, Your Worship, if I could, thank you.
You'll need a request for a recorded vote, please.
Okay. Through Your Worship, I would request a recorded vote on this motion.
We're going to do that again then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Let the record show that all members of council were in favor, with the exception of Councillor Cameron was opposed. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next item, please.
The proposal to purchase a filter under drain pre-selection.
Councillor Fawcett?
Yes, thank you. Through your worship, that the proposal from Anthrach Western Inc. for the filter under drain pre-selection as per the request for proposals and specifications at a cost of $1,856,079.93 exclusive of GST be accepted. And further, that the city's financial contribution be funded from the Water Distribution Reserve.
And seconder, please. Councillor Parker. And I'll let the mover explain how this works.
Okay, so what a filter under drain pre-selection is. Maybe get the staff to give a quick recap. I do have the information, but it still doesn't mean I can understand.
Right. So I think, I don't know if Alexia, here she is. Well, she's smiling because she would have loved to have heard how you would have explained it, but we'll get the correct explanation first. So welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. As part of the larger water treatment plant upgrade project and application for funding, we always intended to do work within the existing facility. And if you'll recall, our existing water treatment facility is dated with the facilities vintage from 1946, 1958, and 1976. And that includes the filters and their under drains are essentially original equipment with very few spare parts that exist anymore. So top of our list for infrastructure upgrades within the existing plant was the filters themselves. And we went out for proposals for these specialty suppliers to help us with that design and supply, with the installation ultimately coming through a general contractor. And because our facility had different filter configurations, we needed somebody who could design the equipment to facilitate installation in all the different configurations. So that's why we went out for request for proposals rather than a just general tender. And in those proposals, we were able to evaluate with our consulting engineer the criteria that would really give us the best product for our facility. And as a reminder, this isn't a capacity upgrade within our existing plant footprint. But it is an upgrade in that it helps us with our run times and really just gives the operators some confidence in our existing system. It is a bit of a bottleneck right now, and we can then close up that or open up that bottleneck, I suppose. Evaluating those proposals, AWI came out highest. This project was in the budget, the capital budget. However, our funding component really was intended to be from borrowed funds. It is cost shared. It is eligible for cost sharing through our funding partnership with the provincial governments. However, our portion was, like I said, intended to be through those borrowed funds. So in advance of that funding borrowing approval, we intend to use Water Distribution Reserve funding to get the project going. There is a risk if we do not award this contract that the design work will then stall and delay tendering the installation portion of the contract. So without further ado, we propose to award the contract to AWI. I'm ready for any questions there might be.
Cullen with his hand up, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. The filters that I understand that this is an upgrade to our existing system, but is this something that we can transfer this particular product, these filters, over to the new water treatment plant, or is this something that we're going to be purchasing and then decommission and they have very little value a few years out? Again, you have to excuse my ignorance because I've got this, water filter kind of thing in the back of my brain that's definitely incorrect. But yeah, so is the technology that we're buying here something we can transfer to the new the new plant so that we actually get value on this piece?
Through your worship to Councillor Cullen. Yes, so the intent for the final configuration is to blend our new water treatment facility water with the existing water treatment facility water. So the filters that we have existing, they're large concrete, they have large concrete footprint. So the technology and equipment must reside within the existing facility. But ultimately, we hope to get another, 50 plus years worth of operating time out of these under drains once installed.
Great, thank you. That answers my question.
Other questions? Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Giboyer.
Thank you, Worship. Through to Alexia. Question I have, I'm a little confused on what are we buying here? Pre-selection? Is it just the design and consultation, or I'm trying to get my head around the pre-selection part of the recommendation.
Through your worship to Councillor Giboyer, it's a staged approach. So the first thing we're purchasing is design services, and then the second portion of that, the 1.8 million, I believe, is the actual supply of the equipment. So it's stainless steel pieces of pipe and framing that ultimately reside within the filter.
Okay, so you're saying it is for making the plan plus the actual filters, correct?
Yes, it's the design services and then the equipment itself. Ultimately, the installation goes through a general contractor.
Okay, thanks.
That was a good question. Others? Okay, not seeing other. I would be curious to know how Alexia's explanation matched up to Councillor Fawcett's. Pretty similar?
I think either one of us could have done that.
I
We
agree.
both understand it thoroughly.
Thank you.
One more little question. I have one more little
Okay,
question.
good. Councillor Giboyer, go ahead.
You mentioned that the previous equipment or the new equipment would be 50 years. Is this written in stone then from the vendor? The warranty on these products, these filters?
Through your worship to Councillor Giboyer, that is not the warranty period, unfortunately. But as part of the evaluation criteria, we looked at existing installations and how long they have been in service, and certainly including the similar water quality and conditions that are in Brandon. That's part of the evaluation, and we have seen 50 plus years of running time. And I'll say this, AWI has also been previous supplier to Brandon's filter under drain system.
Okay, so
Not
they
the
reassured
original-
us that this very expensive project, we're getting our money's worth and it'll last for a long time.
Certainly.
Okay, any other questions? Covered. Thank you very much, Alexia. So you're always very helpful. Back to the main motion. Any other discussion? Who would like to close?
Yes, thank you, through your worship. The reality is there is a good background information on this, and it is just the technical stuff that is a bit beyond our scope. But when you read through it, you understand what needs to be done, and I think Alexia explained things quite well to us. This is a huge part of a big project with our water treatment plant. So, This actually isn't that big of a part of the huge part of the water treatment project.
So we're likely going to be seeing many more pieces like this over the next few years. So I think we're ready for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Next item, please.
The proposed utility rate rider for the water treatment plant upgrade debenture servicing costs.
And Councillor Fawcett, go ahead.
Thank you, through your worship, that the Public Utilities Board order in principle number BO 100-19 be executed with regards to the City of Brandon's proposal to recover the debenture servicing costs for the water treatment plant upgrade in the Brandon Water and Wastewater Utility through a utility rate rider.
Seconder, please. Councillor Desjardins. And who wish to speak? Although we do have Mr. Hammond here, who's the author of this report, if we wanted to get the highlights from him.
Through your worship, if Mr. Hammond would like to give the highlights, this one I actually do understand much more thoroughly than the last one, but Mr. Hammond did write it and he can explain it.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. This item actually relates to the next item on the agenda, so I'll speak to both because they are tied together. So the good news is phase one of the water treatment plant expansion project is coming to a close. So with that project, the construction of the chemical building will modernize the storage, unloading, and containment of chemicals required in that facility, but even better news is it will eliminate the need for chlorine gas in our water treatment process, so it'll be a much safer process when that project phase is done. So with that project, $20.5 million project, city's portion of funding is $16 million, which we always intended on borrowing. We do have borrowing authority in place for that project, and because of the timing of the project and because of the borrowing is outside of the normal rate study that we do, we elected to borrow those funds and then recoup those funds through a rate rider on water utility rates. Also, because of the timing of this project, we elected to do the borrowing in series. We borrowed $8 million of the $16 million last year, and that subsequently was applied as a rate rider on rates last fall. Now that the project's coming to conclusion, it would be appropriate to borrow the next $8 million, and that would be applied to rates sometime this year. There's two components to this borrowing. On the one hand, we need to obtain borrowing authority from the municipal board, so that's the next item on the agenda. And at the same time, we need to apply to the PUB to recover the amounts to be borrowed through a utility rate rider. We need a motion to do that, and hence this item on the agenda. So we have borrowing authority in place, but the next item on the agenda is to submit our final application for borrowing with the current borrowing rates and the amounts to be borrowed. And at the same time, we have PUB approval in principle to recover this $8 million in borrowing through a utility rate rider, but we do have to submit an application to the PUB with the final numbers and amounts. So in terms of the impact on consumers, the first $8 million, which was borrowed last year, resulted in an 8.3 cent utility rate rider, which would be a 2.3% increase to current rates. And this next $8 million in borrowing will result in an 8.9 cent rate rider, which is an increase of 2.4%. As I mentioned, the first rate rider came into effect last fall, and this next rate rider would come into effect sometime this year once approved by the PUB. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions of Mr. Hammond? Councillor Loop.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Hammond. How long are these rate riders going to be on the bills? of residents?
The rate rider will match the term of the borrowing, so 20 years.
20 years? And just a second question, and just for me, just in regards to what the resident will see on their bill, is will there be two separate items for each rate rider, the one that we did previously last year, and now this second one will be listed as two separates?
Through your worship, that's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Those are good questions. Any others? Councillor Fawcett.
Thank you, through your worship, to Mr. Hammond. Thank you for all that explanation and for better understanding for everybody. Going forward, this is like for this water treatment facility, we still have a lot of things to do. Are we looking at doing rate riders as we move forward, or are we looking at doing it I guess along the lines of what Councillor Lupe was saying, may there at one point be 3 or 4 rate riders on there? Because, you know, people, I do want them to all understand that this isn't a glamorous project, but it's essential. And it is sort of the nuts and bolts of what we do in the city. Supply safe water, and this is core to what we do. It isn't glamorous, but ultimately it does cost an awful lot of money. What is our long-term plan? Because there's much more of this coming.
Through your worship to Councillor Fawcett, that's a great question. So when we started phase 1 of the water treatment plant, we were just in the initial stages of our rate study. So for that project and that borrowing, it made more sense to do those as rate riders. Going forward, we have a $125 million project for the next phases of the water treatment plant upgrades. Luckily, we've been able to secure about $80 million in provincial federal funding for that project. That being said, we will have to cover our portion of that project with debt. Because of the timing of our current rate study, we've built those debt projections into the upcoming rate study. Council's has had preliminary briefings on what that rate study will look like, but we're in the process of finalizing it. And of course, as we finalize that rate study before it gets submitted to the Public Utilities Board, more information will be coming to Council and the public.
Okay, that's good, thank you. So that being said, going forward, there is going to be increases. It may not be as riders, it may just be with the overall rate to offset this cost.
Correct. That's our intention, is that the debt associated with the next phases of the project will be incorporated into rates.
Any other questions of Mr. Hammond? Councillor Jarley?
Thank you, through your worship, to Mr. Hammond. So we're going to be seeing some increases in our water bill over the next many years. And we know that we've heard the chemical treatment plant is important, and heard from Mr. Pulak that it's better for us not to use chlorine. Now, I know that we didn't want to use chlorine in Brandon in particular because of where our water treatment facility was, and the fact that that was challenging with the railroad, and just the fact that the ingress and egress in that area of our community isn't the safest. But are we sure and confident that it's worth this investment in water treatment to wean ourselves off of chlorine? Or is this just what everybody's doing now? Municipalities across North America this is just the way to go? Get no longer using chlorine to treat water because it's dangerous. Like and the reason why I'm asking is I just haven't heard a lot of this being a huge problem in North America, that chlorine was really unsafe, and it was really imperative that we all move off of chlorine. So I'm just wondering if the case was made, it's very clear that this is the right thing to do in investing the money in the new treatment plant and weaning ourselves off of chlorine.
Your worship, to Councillor Desjardins, thank you for the question. That's probably a question better answered by an engineer, if Alexia is still available, or perhaps Mr. Fulak can speak to it.
He hasn't been gone from the division that long that he's, although this is staying in your division, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It does. So through your worship to Councillor Desjardins, so there's two parts of the whole chlorine issue. One was chlorine when we use it as a disinfectant to kill pathogenic bacteria in our distribution system, and also prevent any kind of buildup within the pipes. The problem is when we mix chlorine with the organics in the water, it forms trihalomethanes, which have been are suspected carcinogenic. So that's one of the reasons we want to move off of chlorine. The other one is, obviously, as you've already stated, is that chlorine gas in a residential neighborhood, if there was ever to be a leak, would be problematic at best. But that's just one part of the overall upgrade to the facility. We're using this upgrade to also make that transition from chlorine to, in this case, we're using sodium hypochlorite. The overall cost of that transition is not a large one. We're not producing our own sodium hypochlorite. We're going to have it shipped in, and we're going to dose it much the same way as we dose chlorine. So it's not a technically advanced system per se. It's the rest of the upgrades that come along with the water treatment plant that are quite expensive.
Thank you. That was a good explanation. And then just quickly, sodium hypochlorite, chlorine costs for the actual treatment are roughly the same?
I suspect, and again, I'll have to take that under advisement, but my understanding, sodium hypochlorite is bleach, is what it is. And it's just, where in the household you have 3%, what we get shipped to the plant is 12%, and I will have to take it under advisement. I don't know what those costs are, but I suspect bleach is the cheaper alternative to chlorine gas.
The substance you mentioned, Mr. Pulak,
trihalomethanes.
That's the one.
Yeah. And that's when we get our water reports from the, whatever it is, Office of Clean
Drinking Water.
And you know, we're always very solid, but there's that piece that's just, they're only sort of asterisks, you know, that we don't have the capability of doing much about, and they would just assume that we didn't have them. And so this is going to, you know, at last allow us to eliminate the one thing that would be otherwise completely clean bill of health, so to speak. Would you agree?
I do. The other part of that is that, well, for years what we've done to try and compensate for those higher levels of THMs is we've used groundwater to dilute our own water, and so we've reduced the level of organics. Now as we move into a system where we're using filtration to remove those organics, between the two, that's how we're addressing that. And you're absolutely right. There's a standard from the Office of Drinking Water saying this is what your THM should be. When we're not mixing it with groundwater, we're elevated in those THMs. So that's again why we chose the system we have to go forward with the upgrade to the water treatment plant. So it's a mixture of converting from chlorine to sodium hypochlorite plus the filtration.
Thanks. Any other questions? Well, Mr. Pulak still up of a technical nature? A very technical counsel. Thank you very much, Patrick. And also, any other questions, Mr. Hammond? I think we got it covered off then. Back to the motion. Any further discussion? Ready for the question then? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Next item, please.
Under the order of bylaws, your worship, bylaw number 7325, which is to borrow funds for the construction of the chemical building for the water treatment plant, Series B.
Councillor Fawcett.
Thank you, through your worship, that bylaw number 7325 to provide for the Series B borrowing of funds for the purpose of constructing a chemical building in the City of Brandon Water Treatment Plant be read a first time.
Seconded by Councillor Cameron. And as it's only a first reading and just gets the process started, it's not normally debatable, so we're going to call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Bylaw number 7326, which is an amendment to the taxi bylaw to suspend the 10-year age restriction on taxi vehicles.
And Councillor Frangi, go ahead.
Through your worship, I move that bylaw number 7326 to amend taxi bylaw number 6884 to suspend the 10 years age restriction on taxi vehicles be read a second time.
Seconded by Councillor Parker. Mover wish to speak?
Very briefly, your worship, while the council is working to support the business in our city, I believe this the suspension of this bylaw will give the taxi vehicles an opportunity to continue operating, and also while the bylaw goes under the review.
Thank you, Councillor Frangi. I can add, now, we were going to have, was anybody administration going to add to this? Although this was kind of a...
That'd be me.
Okay, well, you can go ahead then. I'll add a few comments.
So you will recall at the February 7th meeting of council, Derek Cullen appeared on behalf of numerous taxi companies respecting the current restriction on the age of vehicles, that they could not exceed 10 model years and obtain a taxi license. He indicated that approximately 20% of the taxi fleet would be impacted in this current licensing year, which those licenses expire at the end of February. And so it was agreed that a full review of the taxi bylaw is required, but in the meantime, in order to accommodate that section of the taxi industry, that a suspension of those rules could be put in place. Also noting that there are biannual inspections of all taxi vehicles required, whereby they need to bring their certificate of inspection into administration to prove that they are safe. And administration also has the authority to pull any vehicle that they feel is not safe off the road until they can provide documentation that it has in fact met the safety standards. So that was one of the concerns raised. It was felt that 10 years is a bit of an arbitrary number, and it's hard to argue with that, but we really did not have an opportunity prior, in between when the presentation was made and the expiration date of these current licenses, to conduct a full review. So that is why we're proposing that that clause be suspended for a maximum of a 1-year period to allow for that review.
That was a great explanation. And, you know, for the sake of the public, so we have a very comprehensive taxi bylaw. It, you know, provides clarity to the taxi industry, also provides various manners of protection and credibility that consumers can rely on. The taxi bylaw is probably about in excess of 20 pages long, so there's a lot of aspects to it. There is an intention to review the entire taxi bylaw, which would obviously take some time. And on the other hand, we do know that we have this predicament that we do understand has been exacerbated by the pandemic. You know, I think most people would realize there's kind of a shortage of vehicles, both new and used, available at the moment, and with a significant amount of taxis that could be having their 10-year expiration, and not a lot of vehicles available for them to buy, would create a hardship for the industry, and consequently a hardship for the taxi consumers of Brandon. So this proposal would you know, just suspend that 10-year requirement, as the city clerk has explained. And although the standard safeties that have to take place twice a year will still have to take place, but this will buy some time to allow administration to commence the full review of the bylaw. which will include many aspects, but it was not expedient in a short period of time to do that whole thing. And so I think this is a good compromise to just deal with that predicament that we're facing that's sort of brought on by the pandemic, and kind of keep the industry going and keeping our consumers well served in that regard. So any other discussion, questions? Councillor Lupke.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to, I guess, Ms. Wazik. Do you know if the certificate of inspection is a standard certificate of inspection like I would get if I went to get a vehicle safetied, or is it different than that?
No, my understanding, it is a standard safety form that's used for all vehicles.
So my only, I guess, comment is this, as you go through the review, and certainly Councillor Desjardins brought this up at the meeting on February 7th, that one of the things we should consider, especially for vehicles older than the 10 years, is perhaps have an emission test performed on them, because that's not part of the standard safety inspection.
Your Worship, to Councillor Lupke, that certainly could be included as an additional requirement for taxi vehicles.
That was the only thing I just wanted to mention prior to the review, that we perhaps make sure that we take a look at that part of it.
Yeah, that's a point well taken. I think there's a lot of aspects of this taxi bylaw that will open up for discussion, and the advent of the, what do they call, ride-sharing business is another, wrinkle that will need to be embraced a little more, and the like. So we'll have lots to chew on as that comes ahead. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we're ready for the question then on second reading. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Third reading is in order. If you'd like, Councillor Frangi.
Through you, Your Worship, I move that the bylaw be read a third and final time.
You, seconded by Councillor Parker again. And any further discussion? Call for the question, and third reading, recorded vote is required. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Next item, please.
Giving of notice, Your Worship?
Any giving of notice this evening? None. Next item, please.
To adjourn would be in order, Your Worship.
Let Councillor Chavoy step up. Moved by Councillor, seconded by Councillor Lupke. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much, everyone.